come to usually stand out on the plaza deck, but today we're sitting. It's such a beautiful day. But we appreciate you guys driving up the most expensive and long dead end road in Washington just to be here today. So, is this anybody's first time? Yes. You live in St. Helens? Oh, okay. I'll let you off the hook. All right. Well, today I'm going to talk about some survivor stories. They all have happy endings, don't worry. But it really shows how unique Mount St. Helens is. Not just showing us what volcanoes are capable of, but what people are capable of. It's pretty cool. And I owe being a ranger to my dad. I got to practice that spiel for Father's Day. And he used to take me camping when I was a kid. Did you guys go camping with your parents and your kids? How about you guys? Do you go camping? Do you still like it? Okay, good. We all know that camping trips can go horribly wrong. They can go great, but they can go horribly wrong. Well, I want you to think of your worst experience and times that by probably 1,000. Something that created this beautiful tree to turn into this monster. Imagine being in a volcanic eruption on your camping trip. It's pretty serious stuff. So this is actually about a dad and his 2 sons, and they're about 7 and 10 years old. How old are you guys? 10? 12? 7. All right, got all ages. Oh, it's raining now. They're about 7 and 10 years old, and they were 11 miles away from the mountain. They couldn't even see the volcano. And that night, their dad had picked out a really nice spot amongst these old growth fir trees. I mean, these are huge trees. And that morning, they woke up, and Buzz, that's the dad's name, like Buzz Aldrin or Buzz Lightyear. And he made a breakfast of champions. He made eggs, bacon, and pancakes. Complete with pancake syrup. Now, I don't know if it was in a jar or if they had packets, but it was there. And things were going great. It was a beautiful Sunday morning until some weird things started to happen. So they heard what sounded like gunshots in the woods, but it's the middle of May. That doesn't make any sense. And then through those big trees, they felt some puffs of wind, and the air pressure started to change. Where is it at? Little rocks kind of like this. They started falling through the trees, the size of marbles. And when Buzz looked up at this beautiful blue sky, there was this black billowing cloud looming over them, turning day into night in seconds. And so Buzz thought, it's time to get out of here. So he got his boys and they started up the trail, and one of his sons says, "Dad, look!" But he doesn't have to look, he can hear it. It sounds like a jet engine coming through the forest, straight at them. And so the only thing he knew how to do was put his back to one of these fir trees, hold his sons to his chest, and just brace for whatever was coming. That is a pretty scary camping trip, right? And you're probably thinking, why were there people out here in this forest that day? Wasn't there some type of warning? Well, there was. But Mount St. Helens was our greatest teacher in showing us how extensive these eruptions can be. It blew scientists' mind. They had no idea. And this place used to look something like this. I know you can't really compare out the windows, but just imagine your favorite place to camp. This is a really serene place, unchanging and peaceful. Just to put a cherry on top, there was a mountain back there. And people would camp and fish and hike through these beautiful woods. People knew it was a volcano, but it hasn't done anything in their lifetime, or their parents' lifetime, or their grandparents' lifetime. So it's probably asleep. It doesn't make any sense for it to do anything in my lifetime. So in March of 1980, when Mount St. Helens started steaming at the top, it caught the world's attention. And people went crazy. They got excited and went to these different viewpoints. Thousands of people a day just to see something fantastic. And this was in spring, so a lot of those days looked like this. They just wanted to capture a glimpse of something we all picture when we picture a volcano erupting. So close your eyes. I promise nobody will pickpocket you. Picture a volcano erupting. You got it in your head? All right, open your eyes. Does it look something like this? No. No. This is what I picture.
It does like for me, because I'm thinking of Hawaii.
Thinking of Hawaii. Give me 5. That's what even scientists were thinking of. They were used to these volcanoes. And they thought maybe Mount St. Helens would do something like that. It's really bad Photoshop, by the way. My boss did that. But Mount St. Helens was doing something more dramatic, more frightening, and that geologists didn't really understand. I need a volunteer. What's your name? Susan? That's my mom's name. Okay, so hold this for everybody. Can everybody see it? This picture was taken at a parking lot that used to be really popular at the base of the mountain. I would give you a reference point, but you can't really see anything. And this was a popular parking lot. This picture was taken in 1979 of Mount St. Helens. Just absorb that. This next picture was taken from the same exact spot a month after Mount St. Helens woke up. What is different? What about that green dot?
Green dot.
The bulge.
Green dot. That green dot is harder than that.
It moved, right? It moved this way. It was bulging out. Thank you. Everybody give her a hand. Usually people say, it's the umbrella. The umbrella is the different part. But this whole thing is like a giant blister on Mount St. Helens. On the north face, what we would be looking at today, the face that's not there anymore. And what do you think was causing that? Pressure from what?
Molten magma.
Lava? What's it called underground? Magma. Beautiful. I love it. Magma. And magma was pushing out at the path of least resistance, making this big belly on Mount St. Helens. Eating too much at Thanksgiving. And it was getting really intense. They knew it was top heavy. I need another volunteer. What's your name? I'm calling you too. Carson. Okay, you're perfect. All right, Carson, I want you to stand right here and hold your arms out like this. How you doing? Is it heavy? A little bit? What if I kept stacking books on it?
Do it.
I'm not going to torture you. Good job. Give him a hand, y'all. If I just kept on doing that, he's going to fall over. The books will, right? That's the same concept as that bulge on Mount St. Helens. If we all stood on one foot and leaned far over, we'd fall down. That mountain is no different. And then what happens to all that pressure building up underneath? Beautiful.
The mountain face planted?
Yeah, that is the best way to describe it, yes. So it's the same concept. If I were to do this, and then open it, and geologists went as far as to say maybe the blast would go sideways. And that's called a lateral blast. It's kind of strange, but it makes sense. So they looked at this other volcano they knew of in Japan that erupted 100 years earlier, called Bondi. And this is Bondi. Looks a little familiar, doesn't it? It's a little creepy. Bondi had a landslide and a lateral blast that took out an area of 27 square miles. So remember that number, there will be a quiz later, all right? So they looked at this landscape, they looked at the big ridges surrounding the volcano. Trying to keep people safe, they drew these red and blue zones. The red zone was completely off limits. You had to be really special to be there. You had to monitor the volcano. You had to be law enforcement, something special. The blue zone was for loggers and miners. Since geologists didn't know what this volcano was really going to do, they had to make a living, right? So they were allowed in here for just a day, not overnight. And then they waited. They put up roadblocks on the road. In the papers it's saying Mount St. Helens is going to erupt soon, and it's just not happening. She actually starts to quiet down. And then one beautiful day in May, the inevitable happens at 8:32 a.m. That landslide, that faceplant, finally occurs. This was the largest landslide in recorded history, ramping up and over this ridge, and releasing that pressure that had built up underneath, creating that lateral sideways blast, hugging the landscape, kind of almost like a liquid. And this was hot, and this was fast, and this was powerful. Powerful enough to take those beautiful trees, blow them over like a giant lawnmower. And if you want even more scale of how big these trees were, what's above my finger? People. 2 grown men standing there. These were big trees, but from the air, they looked like snapped toothpicks. What was that number I told you to remember? 27. Bondi took out an area of 27 square miles. I want you to forget that number. Mount St. Helens took out an area of 230 square miles in 3 minutes. That's an area the size of Chicago in 180 seconds. So here is the blast zone of Mount St. Helens, and you can fit that Bondi obliteration in the middle and not even take up half. It was unprecedented in size and scale. Even stripping some areas of soil. So this is an infrared satellite picture series. The red is vegetation, just use your imagination, pretend it's green. These were both taken from space before the eruption and afterwards. Huge difference. And because it was so big, people were out here, and they didn't realize it. Nobody did. And do you think Buzz and his 2 sons were the only ones out there? No, they were in fact in the Green River Valley. You see our fiber optic display over there? You can count how many ridges were over until you get to the Green River Valley. And there were a group of people who were about my age. I'm in my early 20s. There were 2 guys camping with that group of people. Their names were Dan and Brian. Are these a lot of names I'm throwing at you? Yes, okay. So just remember Buzz, then Dan and Brian. That's all you need to remember. And Dan and Brian were sleeping in. They're in their early 20s. It's 8 o'clock in the morning. He's expecting a volcanic eruption. And then they hear and see that lateral blast coming towards them. And they try to outrun it, but this thing is going 300 miles per hour at least. So it's really hard to outrun. And Dan didn't even have time to put his shoes on or button his jeans. He's running out. And Brian falls in some tangled trees. They fell. He broke his hip, and then he fell in a hole. Dan was running around watching those trees sway and fall, and he had his hands like this. And I said it was hot. His hands burned because he was out in the open a little too long. Where they were, it's enough to make your hair sizzle. It's like sitting in an oven with your DiGiorno's pizza. It's not a fun place to be. And the ash was so thick and dense that when they were calling each other, they couldn't hear or see anything. And Dan wouldn't have found Brian had he not fallen in the same exact hole that Brian fell in. Brian looked up and saw this foot and tugged on it. Dan helped him out of the hole with those burned hands. And then 2 more of their friends came to help. And it took all 3 of them to drag Brian, who couldn't walk, to this old guard shack to leave him so they can run and go get help. And so he's waiting and he's terrified. And Dan tries to keep up, but I want you to really appreciate your shoes and what they do for you. Imagine being in a volcanic eruption without your shoes on. It's pretty intense. And so he's trying to walk through this hot ash and over trees that big. And finally, he just stands in this gritty river, and he just lets them go. Now they have 2 people to go find help for, and they go on. Things look pretty bleak for Dan until these 3 figures step out of the ash, and who they were. Buzz and his boys. Their tree had stood as others had fallen around them, and they crawled in a hole themselves and put a sleeping bag on top of themselves. And they hiked out. They came across Dan, and Buzz just happened to have a spare pair of shoes in his backpack, and he tied them on this complete stranger's feet. He buttoned his jeans, and they didn't have any water, but they did have pancake syrup. They had pancake syrup and candy, a dentist's dream, right? And so they hiked out together, all 4 of them. And were spotted by helicopter 12 hours after the eruption, and this is them. That's Dan in the front. Those are not gloves on his hands, those are those burns. Yeah, that was right. But Buzz did get his shoes back. You're probably thinking, well, what about Brian? Well, those 2 friends had finally been spotted by a helicopter. They turned down the ride, said, go find this guy. And the helicopter pilots looked, they couldn't find him, he wasn't there. But Buzz had happened to pass someone who had crawled on his belly through the ash up and over trees, just trying to get out of there. Can you imagine being that terrified? And Buzz was able to tell those helicopter pilots, hey, this guy's over here. Happened to be Brian, and they picked him up. And this is a quote from Brian after the eruption. Is anybody brave enough to read it? Yes. What's your name? Okay. I'll give you my microphone.
People later asked, didn't you know you were playing with a loaded gun? He said, we couldn't see the volcano and didn't think of it. We'd only camped in the woods by a pretty river.
Thank you. Everybody give him a hand for being so brave. I wouldn't do that. So that's what makes Mount St. Helens so unique. People out here weren't really actually thrill-seeking. We had no idea at the time what these beasts were capable of. We were used to Hawaii. Now we know. And it's great because we can continue to educate people and communicate with people all over the world who are curious about what happened here 37 years ago. 57 people lost their lives that day. It would have been more had it been on Monday. But the good news is we can continue to tell these stories that are so important, that make Mount St. Helens human. And so, I'll leave you with this. You guys are helping do that with those silly little wristbands you have on your wrist, and you're an adult over the age of 16. That provides 90% of our budget, so without you, we couldn't continue to tell these stories or even keep the lights on in this place. So thank you guys so much from wherever you came to be here today. I'm Ranger Anna. If you guys have any questions, kind of left it on a sad note, come ask me. You guys are free to go.